If you've been feeling calmer lately for no apparent reason, it's no coincidence. It's a sign. A sign that something heavy in your life has come to an end. All the wounds you've been carrying, all the unseen struggles, are now beginning to let you go. And for the first time, you're truly moving toward a lighter life. Before we continue, take a moment to breathe. If these words feel like they're speaking directly to you, hit subscribe, like, comment, and share. There might be another soul out there who needs to hear this today. There comes a moment in life when the endless cycle of pain, confusion, and emotional exhaustion suddenly begins to lose its grip. Not because you gave up, not because you escaped, but because you have quietly, almost invisibly, crossed a threshold that most people never even recognize. What once felt like an unrelenting storm starts to feel distant, as if it no longer has the same authority over your inner world. And in that subtle shift, something profound is happening. You are not breaking down, you are breaking through. The struggles that once defined your days were never random, and they were never meaningless. They were shaping you, layer by layer, stripping away illusions, false attachments, and outdated versions of yourself that could not follow you into what comes next. It may have felt like loss, like rejection, like being pushed to your limits over and over again, but in truth, it was a form of deep internal reconstruction. You were being rewritten from within. For a long time, it likely felt unfair. You may have questioned why your path seemed heavier than others, why you had to endure lessons that cut deeper and lasted longer. There were moments when nothing made sense, when the silence was louder than any answer, and when moving forward felt like walking through resistance you couldn't explain. But what you couldn't see then is becoming clearer now. You were being prepared for a level of awareness, strength, and alignment that requires pressure to awaken. Not surface-level change, but a complete recalibration of how you think, feel, and exist. This kind of transformation is not gentle. It does not arrive wrapped in comfort. It arrives through contrast, through experiences that force you to confront what is real and what is not, what is yours and what was never meant to stay. And now, something is different. Even if you can't fully articulate it, you can feel it. The same triggers don't hit as hard. The same fears don't control you the way they used to. There is space where there used to be chaos. There is clarity where there used to be confusion. It's subtle, but it's undeniable. This is what happens when you move beyond survival mode without even realizing it. You stop reacting the same way because you are no longer the same person. The identity that was built around struggle is dissolving, making room for something more grounded, more aware, more intentional. You are not being tested anymore in the same way. You are being elevated. This is the part most people miss, because it doesn't come with a dramatic announcement. It comes quietly, almost like a whisper beneath the noise of everyday life. But if you pay attention, you'll notice it. The weight is lifting, not all at once, but steadily. The resistance is fading. The version of you that had to fight for every ounce of peace is stepping aside, and in its place, a new version is emerging, one that no longer needs to prove, chase, or force things into place. And that is how you know, the hardest part is no longer ahead of you. It's behind you. For a long time, it likely felt deeply unfair in ways that were difficult to explain to anyone else. You may have found yourself silently questioning why your path seemed heavier, why your challenges felt more persistent, more complex, and more emotionally demanding than those around you. There were moments when you compared your journey to others and couldn't understand why things appeared to flow more easily for them, while you were left navigating cycles of effort, setback, and internal struggle that seemed to repeat without clear resolution. It wasn't just the external situations. It was the internal weight of carrying questions that had no immediate answers, of holding on while not knowing when relief would come. At times, it may have felt like you were being stretched beyond what you could handle, as if life kept asking more from you without offering clarity in return. There were periods where everything felt uncertain, where even your sense of direction seemed to dissolve. You may have experienced long stretches of silence, times when nothing changed, nothing improved, and nothing made sense. In those moments, it was easy to feel stuck, disconnected, or even forgotten, as though your efforts were going unnoticed by the very force guiding your life. Moving forward didn't feel like progress, it felt like resistance. Every step required more energy than it should have, and even small decisions carried an emotional weight that was difficult to shake. You may have questioned your own strength, wondering if you were somehow doing something wrong, or if you were simply not meant to experience ease. But what you couldn't fully see at the time is becoming clearer now with distance and awareness. You were not being held back. You were being shaped with precision. Every delay, every challenge, every emotional confrontation was part of a deeper preparation that operates beyond surface understanding. You were being guided into a level of awareness that cannot be reached through comfort alone. This kind of growth demands pressure, because it requires you to look beyond appearances and connect with something more authentic within yourself. You were learning to discern what truly matters, to release attachments that were rooted in fear or habit, and to stand in a version of yourself that is not dependent on external validation. This was never about punishment, and it was never about being overlooked. It was about transformation at a depth that most people never reach because they avoid the very discomfort you were forced to face. You were being asked to develop a kind of resilience that is not reactive, but grounded. A kind of clarity that is not borrowed from others, but discovered through your own lived experience. And although it didn't feel like progress at the time, every moment of confusion, every period of stillness, and every emotional low was contributing to a complete internal recalibration. You were being prepared not just to survive your circumstances, but to outgrow them entirely and step into a level of alignment where things no longer have to be forced, because you have become someone who naturally moves in the right direction. And now, something is undeniably different, even if you can't fully explain it in words. The shift didn't arrive with a dramatic moment or a clear turning point. It emerged quietly, almost unnoticed, like a subtle change in the atmosphere of your inner world. But if you pause and reflect, you can feel it. The things that once overwhelmed you don't carry the same intensity anymore. Situations that used to trigger deep emotional reactions now pass through you with less resistance. It's not that life suddenly became perfect or free from challenges, but your relationship with those challenges has transformed in a way that is both subtle and profound. You are no longer reacting from the same place, because you are no longer anchored in the same version of yourself. There is now a space between what happens to you and how you respond to it, and within that space lies a kind of quiet power that wasn't accessible to you before. You're beginning to observe rather than immediately absorb. You're able to recognize patterns without getting lost inside them. The fears that once dictated your choices have lost much of their control, not because they completely disappeared, but because you've outgrown the identity that gave them authority. What once felt personal now feels like part of a larger process that you can witness without being consumed by it. This is the result of everything you've endured, the emotional intensity, the uncertainty, the repeated cycles of challenge and release. None of it was wasted. It was all refining your awareness. You may also notice that your need for external validation has begun to fade. Where you once sought reassurance, approval, or confirmation from others, there is now a growing sense of inner stability. You're less inclined to chase, to prove, or to explain yourself in ways that drain your energy. There is a deeper trust forming within you, one that doesn't rely on immediate results or visible outcomes. You're starting to understand that not everything needs to be forced into place, and that alignment often happens in ways that are not immediately visible but deeply felt. This shift in perception changes everything, because it moves you out of survival mode and into a state of awareness where your energy is no longer scattered across fear, doubt, and constant reaction. What makes this transformation even more significant is that it didn't come from external change. It came from within you. Your circumstances may not have completely shifted yet, but your internal landscape has, and that changes how everything unfolds moving forward. You are no longer carrying the same weight, even if the external world looks similar. The identity that was built around struggle, overthinking, and emotional exhaustion is gradually dissolving, making space for something more grounded, more centered, and more intentional. You are stepping into a version of yourself that doesn't need to fight for clarity, because clarity now comes from within. And this is how you know that something real has shifted. It's not loud, it's not performative, and it doesn't need validation. It's steady, quiet, and deeply rooted. You are no longer trying to survive your life. You are beginning to experience it from a place of awareness and control that once felt out of reach. The same world exists around you, but you are moving through it differently, with a sense of calm that is no longer dependent on circumstances. This is the beginning of a new phase, one where your strength is no longer defined by how much you can endure, but by how deeply you understand yourself and how intentionally you choose to move forward. This is the part of the journey that most people overlook, not because it lacks importance, but because it doesn't arrive with intensity or obvious recognition. There is no clear signal announcing that you have made it through the hardest phase, no external validation confirming that something within you has fundamentally changed. Instead, it unfolds quietly, almost invisibly, beneath the surface of your everyday life. It can be easy to miss if you are still expecting transformation to feel dramatic or overwhelming. But real, lasting change rarely feels that way. It is subtle, consistent, and deeply internal. It shows up in the way you think, in the way you respond, and in the way you carry yourself through situations that once would have unsettled you. If you begin to pay closer attention, you will start to notice these shifts revealing themselves in small but meaningful ways. The emotional weight you once carried no longer feels as heavy as it used to. Situations that once demanded all of your energy now feel more manageable, almost as if they no longer have the same authority over your state of mind. You may find yourself letting go more easily, not because you have stopped caring, but because you have developed a deeper understanding of what is truly worth holding on to. There is a quiet detachment forming within you, not cold or indifferent, but balanced. It allows you to stay present without becoming overwhelmed, to engage without losing yourself in the process. The resistance that once defined your path is also beginning to fade. Where you once felt like you had to push, force, or struggle to create movement in your life, there is now a growing sense of flow. Things may not be perfect, but they are no longer as obstructed. Opportunities, ideas, and clarity begin to emerge in ways that feel more natural, less forced. This is not because life has suddenly become easier in a superficial sense, but because you are no longer approaching it from a place of tension and survival. You are aligned in a way that allows movement to happen without constant friction. The energy you once spent on overthinking, resisting, or trying to control outcomes is now being redirected into awareness, presence, and intentional action. What is also changing is your relationship with effort itself. You are beginning to understand that not everything requires struggle to be meaningful. There is a shift from proving your strength through endurance to expressing your strength through clarity and choice. The version of you that believed you had to fight for every step is gradually stepping aside, making room for a more grounded way of existing. One that trusts timing, recognizes alignment, and no longer equates difficulty with value. This shift can feel unfamiliar at first, even uncomfortable, because it challenges the patterns you have lived in for so long. But it is also liberating, because it frees you from the constant need to brace yourself for what might go wrong. And in the midst of all this, a new version of you is steadily emerging. This version is not driven by urgency, fear, or the need to control every outcome. It is rooted in awareness, patience, and a deeper sense of trust in the process of your life. You are no longer chasing stability. You are becoming it. You are no longer searching for peace outside of yourself. You are cultivating it from within. This is how you know that something real has shifted. The fight that once defined your existence is no longer your default state. The struggle that once felt endless is no longer your identity. Without any dramatic announcement, without any external confirmation, you have moved beyond the phase that once felt like it would never end. And now, you are standing in a space that is quieter, clearer, and far more aligned with who you are becoming. This is the point where everything begins to reorient itself, not through force or urgency, but through a quiet, undeniable sense of alignment that builds from within. You are no longer operating from the same internal pressure that once made everything feel like a constant effort to survive, to prove, or to keep up. Instead, there is a noticeable shift in how you approach life itself. You are not chasing outcomes with the same desperation, nor are you trying to control every detail in order to feel secure. There is a growing understanding that what is truly meant for you does not require exhaustion to obtain. This realization does not come from theory or belief. It comes from lived experience, from everything you have already moved through and outgrown. You may begin to notice that your priorities are changing in ways that feel both unfamiliar and deeply right. Things that once seemed urgent or necessary no longer carry the same weight. The need to constantly seek approval, to measure your worth through external validation, or to prove yourself to others begins to dissolve. In its place, a more grounded sense of self begins to take shape, one that is not easily shaken by opinions, expectations, or temporary circumstances. This is not detachment in a negative sense, but rather a form of clarity that allows you to see what truly matters and what does not. You are becoming more selective with your energy, more intentional with your time, and more aware of the environments and connections that either support your growth or quietly drain it. At the same time, there is a shift in how things begin to come into your life. Where there was once resistance, there is now a subtle sense of flow. Opportunities may appear in unexpected ways, conversations may carry more depth, and decisions may feel clearer without requiring endless analysis. This does not mean that everything suddenly becomes effortless, but it does mean that you are no longer fighting against yourself in the process. You are moving with a kind of internal coherence that allows things to unfold more naturally. The constant tension between what you feel and what you think begins to ease, creating space for a more intuitive way of navigating your path. You are also starting to understand that alignment is not about perfection. It is about honesty. It is about choosing what resonates with your deeper sense of self, even when it requires letting go of what once felt familiar or comfortable. This can be one of the most challenging aspects of this phase, because it asks you to release identities, roles, or attachments that you may have held onto for a long time. But unlike before, this process does not feel like loss in the same way. It feels like clarity. It feels like making space for something more authentic to take root. You are no longer holding onto things out of fear. You are choosing based on awareness. And perhaps most importantly, you are beginning to trust yourself in a way you never fully did before. Not in a loud or overconfident way, but in a steady, grounded sense that you are capable of navigating whatever comes next. You no longer need constant reassurance that you are on the right path, because you can feel it. There is a quiet certainty that replaces the old patterns of doubt and second-guessing. You understand now that your journey was never about forcing life to meet your expectations. It was about becoming the version of yourself that can meet life with clarity, resilience, and presence. And from this place, everything begins to shift. Not all at once, but in ways that are lasting, meaningful, and deeply aligned with who you are becoming. And eventually, you arrive at an understanding that changes everything. Not in a sudden, overwhelming revelation, but in a steady, grounded realization that settles deep within you. You begin to see that nothing you went through was misplaced, unnecessary, or without purpose. Every moment of confusion, every emotional low, every period where you felt disconnected or uncertain was part of a larger unfolding that was guiding you toward this exact point. What once felt like chaos now reveals a pattern. What once felt like endless struggle now shows itself as a structured process of becoming. You are no longer looking at your past through the lens of pain alone. You are beginning to see it as a series of experiences that shaped your awareness, refined your perspective, and strengthened your ability to stand in your own truth. There is also a shift in how you relate to the idea of suffering itself. It no longer defines you, and it no longer holds the same meaning it once did. You understand now that suffering was not your identity. It was a phase, a condition that existed for a time but was never meant to stay. This realization creates a sense of freedom that is difficult to describe, because it is not dependent on external circumstances changing overnight. It is an internal release, a quiet detachment from the weight you used to carry. You are no longer holding on to past experiences as proof of limitation or as evidence of what could go wrong. Instead, you begin to see them as confirmation of what you have already moved through and outgrown. The narrative shifts from, "Why did this happen to me?" to, "This is what helped me become who I am now." As this awareness deepens, you begin to notice that your sense of peace is no longer fragile. It is not easily disrupted by temporary setbacks or unexpected changes. There is a stability within you that remains intact even when circumstances are uncertain. This does not mean you are unaffected by life, but it does mean you are no longer defined by every fluctuation. You have developed a kind of emotional resilience that allows you to experience without collapsing, to feel without losing your center. This is the result of everything you have endured, not as a burden, but as a foundation. You are no longer bracing yourself for impact at every turn. You are standing with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can navigate whatever arises. At the same time, there is a growing sense of openness toward the future. Where there was once hesitation or fear, there is now curiosity. You are no longer approaching what comes next with the expectation that it will repeat the past. Instead, you are allowing yourself to imagine possibilities that once felt out of reach. This shift is subtle but powerful, because it changes how you engage with opportunities, relationships, and your own potential. You are not limiting yourself based on what you have been through. You are expanding based on what you have learned. The future no longer feels like something you have to survive. It feels like something you are ready to step into. And in this space, something becomes undeniably clear. Your suffering did not just end, it transformed. It became insight, strength, awareness, and depth. It became the very thing that now allows you to move through life with clarity and intention. You are not the same person who once felt overwhelmed, lost, or uncertain. You have evolved into someone who carries their experiences differently, who understands themselves more deeply, and who no longer needs to rely on struggle as a measure of growth. This is not the end of your journey, but it is the end of a chapter that shaped you in ways you are only now beginning to fully understand. And as you move forward, you do so with a sense of peace that is not temporary, not conditional, but rooted in the truth of everything you have become.